Great. Thank you so much for coming here today on this Saturday morning. I'm going to talk to you a bit more about inspiring your child into action, how to leverage motivational mindsets and practices so your child can achieve academically and beyond. As Ehud mentioned, this is sponsored by Reach Learning, and my organization is called Catalyst Methods. So I had a few goals for today's webinar. So I wanted to teach you guys some tips and tricks to motivate and engage your child. And I also wanted to help you understand the theory behind why these tips and tricks work. I also wanted to let you know if any questions pop up, feel free to put those in the chat. I'll be kind of monitoring the chat during some breaks. And we also have some poll questions throughout this presentation, so you guys can engage in more active learning instead of just passively sitting and listening, but whatever you prefer. So what I would love for you to also do is during this presentation, think about how might I use this with my child? How might my child react to this? And have I tried something like this before? I think a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about are things that maybe you've done before, and maybe you didn't know why you were doing them, or you've heard other parents doing them. So I'd love for you to think about, if you've tried this before, how might your child react to it, and how might you use these tips with your child? So I've divided this presentation up into 3 big ideas, and so I'm going to dive into that first big idea. So big idea number 1 is learning used to be thought of as primarily motivated through rewards and incentives. And I'm going to show you a few pictures here. So you might have, if you've ever taken an undergraduate psychology class, have heard of Pavlov's dog or conditioning. And so Pavlov did, back in Russia many years ago, did an experiment where he was curious in studying how dogs salivate in response to food. And salivating is like their drooling response. And he came up with this totally on accident, but he noticed that when the dogs heard the footsteps of the researchers that came into the lab to then feed the dogs, that the dogs exhibited this salivation response. And he then later took that idea and, instead of footsteps in the lab, had a bell that he would ring, and he was able to then train dogs to salivate without the presence of the bone. So he did this by first pairing the bone or food or treat with a bell and getting the salivation response, and then slowly took the bone away and was able to get that salivation response just by simply ringing the bell. And I'm sure you guys are asking yourselves, well, what does a dog salivating have to do with my child? My child is not a dog. How it does relate is that during this part in time, a branch of psychology was born called behaviorism, which is the idea that we can use incentives to get people to do things that we want them to do. So anything that we want them to do, behaviors, anything we want them to learn, we can then kind of train people to do that using a system of rewards and incentives for doing that.